From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 9 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us on this Tuesday night. I'm Russ Riesinger. Billings voters coming out in support of local schools passing the elementary mill levy. Taking a look at the numbers, it's not official yet. There were some ballots that were hand delivered that won't be counted until tomorrow. But as you can see, it is going to be a convincing win for the levy, which will help with maintenance and operating costs for elementary schools. 16,188, or about 55% voting for it, and 45% against it. This will add about $25 a year to your property taxes for a house worth $250,000. Elder Grove's general fund levy has failed, however, with almost 70% voting against it. Elder Grove also deciding on two trustees, Kelly Cakes leading the votes, with Nathan Zito in second and Michael Laird a close third. And we'll have reaction from Billings School Superintendent Greg Upham coming up tonight at 10 on the MTN News on Q2. Tonight, a Billings long-term care facility is in quarantine because of COVID-19, and Governor Bullock is putting out an emergency order because of it. 58 people in all, 43 residents and 15 staff members have tested positive so far at the Canyon Creek Memory Care Community on Billings West End. 2 of the residents are in the hospital tonight. How COVID-19 got into the facility on Billings West End remains a mystery, much like the virus itself. But one thing is very clear: it's highly contagious and especially dangerous for older people with underlying conditions.
Older people tend to have multiple underlying chronic disorders that make it more difficult. And I think the other piece, particularly in a memory care facility, is people who have significant cognitive impairment can't follow the instructions of keeping your distance and washing your hands and wearing a mask. So they're at very high risk to get the disease. And once they get it, they're at very high risk for severe disease and high risk of death.
The owner of Canyon Creek says protocols were put into place back in mid-February to prevent exposure to COVID-19, limiting visitation and monitoring staff. Governor Bullock addressed the situation this afternoon.
Canyon Creek had declined participation when we encouraged sentinel testing. Every single assisted living facility should be conducting sentinel testing. So the purpose of this rule is to help prevent what's happened at Canyon Creek moving forward.
The governor plans an order this week making that testing mandatory for visitors to be allowed in senior facilities. Visitations are already on hold in Yellowstone County after positives in a number of senior facilities last week.
I know a lot of people are still thinking that it's not that big a deal, but I think when you look at what we talked about over and over, the risk of getting in vulnerable populations, how quickly it can explode in that type of population.
Well, along with the 58 positive tests at Canyon Creek, 33 people, mostly staff, tested negative, and they're still awaiting test on another 24 staff and residents. Well, both the state and Yellowstone County smashing records as the total active cases stands at 536 tonight. Yellowstone County surpasses Gallatin County in total cases, now has more than 2 times the number of active cases. Yellowstone County at 199, Missoula County at 58, Gallatin County 54, and 27 active cases in Bighorn County. So far, more than 105,000 tests have been performed. And even with the sharp increase in Yellowstone County, Bighorn County health authorities tonight say their county remains the hot spot in the state. The latest data shows Bighorn County has more than 3 times the total number of cases and active cases per capita of Yellowstone County. The county has recently been averaging between 2 to 3 new cases each day, with a total of 22 new cases in this first week of July. As of June 1st, Vitalant Blood Donation Center in Billings started testing for COVID-19 antibodies. Donor recruitment manager Aaron Baker says they're testing individuals following a successful blood donation. Baker says just because you test positive or negative to having the antibodies doesn't mean you're immune to the virus. Baker says results for the test will take between 10 and 14 days.
This is an added benefit that we're able to give to our donors. It can be a peace of mind for you if you're wondering if you've had it. A lot of times you hear that, well, I could have had it back in March, or I'm pretty sure I had it. Even if you have had the antibody, there's no proof that that causes an immunity to COVID. So please make sure you're still following the CDC recommendations for being out in public, 6-foot distancing, wearing your mask when possible. And if they have any other questions, feel free to call us. We're more than happy to walk you through the process before you come in to make sure you're comfortable.
Now, Baker says if you do test positive for having the COVID-19 antibodies, you may become eligible to donate convalescent plasma. It's a plasma treatment for patients who need a boost to fight off the virus. Last week, both the governor's office and the state superintendent of schools released guidelines for how Montana public schools can reopen this fall. School officials, however, had already come up with their own guidelines and say they'll consider all three plans as they move forward. MTN's Mike Dennison has more.
Local school districts in Montana will make the call on how they plan to reopen this fall and are likely to have some forms of kids back in the classroom with face-to-face learning. But school officials say it won't be business as usual.
You may be coming back full bore. I don't believe that it's going to look like that. I think that there's probably going to be a blend of remote delivery of education services if they come back to the classroom in select and smaller groups.
Miller says many schools have been surveying parents and school staff on what it will take to make them feel safe. For those who don't feel comfortable being at school among larger groups of people, online classrooms will have to be available. And in-person learning will probably look different too, especially in larger urban districts.
If you've got a group of 30 students together, don't slice that deck and resort it 6 or 7 times a day, or you will not be able to track who saw who and who was in proximity to whom, and you won't have an effective way of isolating the impact of a positive COVID infection.
That means kids may be in one classroom for most of the day, with different teachers coming to them for different subjects. For classes not everyone takes, like foreign languages or advanced placement, those may go online only. There's also consideration of having half the kids coming to classrooms for part of the week and the other half the rest of the week, and remote learning when they're not at the building. School officials also say you'll see lots of cleaning of facilities and other preventative steps, like temperature checks.
Presence of any type of mitigation is going to be throughout every school day and every school. You're just not going to be able to walk into school and not notice it.
Schools are on a tight timeline with perhaps 30 days to finalize their plans. School officials say one thing the public can do to make their job a little easier is take precautions to stem the spread of the disease so the numbers decrease between now and the start of the school year. They're also saying anything approaching normal at Montana Public Schools appears a long ways off. And we haven't even talked about one other aspect. How much more is this new normal at Montana schools going to cost? One estimate places it at $70 million for this coming year. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Montana has almost 500 separate school districts serving nearly 150,000 students. Despite spikes in new cases of the coronavirus, the Trump administration is making an all-out push to reopen all schools this fall. Skylar Henry is at the White House, where administration officials are calling the return to school educationally and economically vital.
During a roundtable discussion at the White House, the president backed up his calls for students to return to the classroom this fall.
We're very much going to put pressure on governors and everybody else to open the schools. It's very important for our country. It's very important for the well-being of the student and the parents.
But during a remote House committee hearing, the head of the nation's largest teachers union said the race to return lacks the proper plan to keep students and educators safe.
We've got millions now facing overcrowded classrooms, trying to figure out how do you make that work coming back.
The nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, agrees with the president in that students should be back in school. But he says districts will have to get creative with their approach.
The secondary unintended consequences of having children not being able to go to school has ripple effects for the family that might have deleterious effects that really override the so-called safety benefits.
Dr. Fauci also notes the country is still knee-deep in the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic. The CDC has issued preliminary guidance for schools with social distancing and mask-wearing guidelines, but officials emphasize a need for all involved to follow them.
We can get back to school. We can do so safely if we all think smart, if we accept our individual responsibility and our collective responsibility.
As schools and universities finalize fall plans, Florida's top education official is mandating schools open statewide, despite recent spikes in new COVID-19 cases. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
Yesterday, the Trump administration announced the State Department will not issue visas for international students whose university classes are fully online this fall. Officials are encouraging affected students to transfer to those colleges offering in-person classes in order to continue their studies in the United States. The 21-year-old man killed in an overnight shooting in the Billings Heights has now been identified. Preston Greger of Billings was shot in the 11:30 last night. It happened in the 600 block of Samuel Court. Lieutenant Brandon Woolley says the shooter, a 52-year-old man, was interviewed and released. Detectives are trying to determine if Greger was also seen just minutes before that shooting walking in and out of traffic on Main Street intoxicated. The case is currently classified as a homicide as the investigation moves forward. Well, we know that nationally, fireworks sales were up this 4th of July, and for a lot of people here in Billings, it seemed like there were more fireworks being set off around town than before. Despite this, Billings Police Department and the Billings Fire Department reported that this holiday weekend didn't differ very much from years past. Billings Police told Q2 that overall calls to them on the weekend were down from where they were last year, and they only had 6 more calls relating to fireworks than they did in 2019. There was only 1 citation given for fireworks. The fire department reported an even quieter weekend. All fireworks-related calls were either canceled shortly after they came in or amounted to nothing being found at the scene. Still to come on tonight's MTN 9 o'clock news, a bear that rummaged through a campsite in West Yellowstone and proved to be too smart for some bear-proof trash cans. Not only has a new lease on life, it will now be used as an educational tool. But first, Bob McGuire is in with your full week's forecast after a bumpy afternoon here in Billings.